Welcome to the presentation of the OIC Segregation of Duties Assessment Services. I am Roger Drolet, and I am the Oracle GRC professional for the OIC. I am also the founder of the OIC. Today, what we'll cover is the business considerations for a segregation of duties program. Why even be worried about having proper segregation of duties? Next, we'll talk about an approach to an SOD program. We'll talk about the various activities that are generally performed in conjunction with the segregation of duties program. Next, what I want to talk about briefly is what the client needs to do to prepare for us so that we can complete the assessment. It doesn't take very long, but there are certain things the client's going to need to do. Next, I'll discuss and cover some of these sample segregation duties controls and restricted access controls that we have. I will also cover some of the waivers that we define or conditions that we define to eliminate some of the false positives, reporting segregation of duty violations that are not in fact really true segregation of duty violations. Next, we'll take a look at some of the sample output that you get from our SOD assessment. And finally, I'll give you a cost estimate for the SOD assessment. Okay, first of all, let's talk about what is segregation of duties. Segregation of duties, or SOD, is a separation of incompatible duties that could allow one person to commit and conceal fraud that may result in financial loss or misstatement of the company's financial statements. Segregation duties may be within an application or within an infrastructure. What we're going to do is we're going to key on segregation of duties as it applies to the Oracle applications, primarily Oracle financial applications. Segregation duties represents a key internal control that ensures that no single person has too much influence over any business transaction or operation. It serves to prevent unintentional errors or fraud and ensures timely detection of errors that may occur. It also provides a method of improving organizational business process and IT control alignment. Now, segregation of duties has always been an important component of a properly functioning internal control environment. However, in the past, or at least since 2002, when Sarbanes-Oxley was enacted, it has certainly come to the security has come to the forefront. Now, the other thing we generally talk about when we talk about segregation of duties is the least privilege principle, and all that says is that we should give a user access to only those functions that he or she needs to complete their jobs. Not what they want, but what they need to complete their jobs. Okay, some of the common challenges and pitfalls of IT controls. Control deficiencies typically stem from changes or actions taken outside the formal process. One of the challenges is to limit and enforce your policies at enterprise level. Sometimes we don't have the support we need from senior management, or the segregation of duties program or IT controls program isn't in alignment with the IT or the goals of the business. Okay. Another reason, another challenge is just having a lack of user education and awareness of segregation of duties. At times, companies tend to put more emphasis on mitigating controls, or what they consider to be compensating controls, in place of the proper system segregation and duty controls that they can in fact implement. And then, of course, they don't have. It's very difficult to doing an assessment of your segregation and duty controls unless you have a mechanized method for doing it. Oracle provides assists a significant number of responsibilities. Most companies define a significant number of custom Oracle responsibilities, and they are assigned to many users, and it's very difficult to assess these controls. And typically, a lack of segregation of duties leads to access creep, increased risk of fraud, and the processes fail. So, why is there an increased interest in segregation duties? Well, some of the drivers include regulatory compliance. Like I said or mentioned before, Sarbanes-Oxley was enacted in 2002, and that's one of the primary drivers. All publicly held companies must comply with Sarbanes-Oxley, and one of the internal controls as part of the COSO framework is our segregation duty controls. Then we have a number of privacy laws that have been enacted. I won't go into them all, but obviously you have to have controls over persons, consumers' private information, such as their name and address, social security number, bank account information, etc. Right? And then we have to have a mechanism for just providing access to users as they come on board. So you have to be concerned with segregation of duties when during the user provisioning process. All right. And then another concern is the fact that most of the ERP implementations, upgrades or implementations of R12 are done quickly, and at times little emphasis is put on proper segregation of duties when these custom Oracle responsibilities are defined. We talked a little bit about the regulatory compliance and the fact that Sarbanes-Oxley provides a compelling case for the implementation and maintenance of appropriate segregation of duties. And we talked about the privacy laws, the fact that more and more business is done online and increases the risk of identity theft and fraud. Okay, now these are just some of the considerations as to why you need to take a look at your access security, segregation duties, and restricted access. Okay. Now, in terms of preparing for the assessment, these are some of the things we ask our clients to do before we begin the assessment. Is to take a copy of the production instance and create a test instance. We're going to run a script that extracts information from your test instance so that we can do the analysis. And then what we're going to do is we're going to recommend some actions that you take to resolve or remediate these segregation of duty violations. And it's a best practice to do all these actions in the test instance first, and then to test them thoroughly to make sure that we know what the impact is before we move them on into the production instance using your company's change management policies and procedures. All right. We ask that you provide the OIC with system administrator access to the test instance. This gives us the ability to test the output that we're going to get from the assessment and make sure that the information is accurate. And it also allows us to help you remediate some of the incidents. Okay. Next, we ask you that you identify the business process owner for each of your process flows, like procure to pay, order to cash, assets, etc. These are the individuals who will be responsible for making decisions with regards to access privileges. Then we ask that you identify your system administrator or system administrators, if there's more than one, who will actually do the remediation work. In other words, they're going to have to modify Oracle menus and responsibilities to remediate or resolve these SOD incidents. We also ask that you provide a copy of your change controls policies so that we understand what they are before we move these changes to your production instance. In addition, we ask that you review the SOD rules that we use for the assessment with your external auditors. You'll find that most likely these are the same types of rules or rules that they have given you or asked you to use to extract information for your systems in prior audits, all right? And then, as part of doing all this work, obviously we want to come up with a final design for your segregation of duties and your security profiles for all your users, all right? Next, let's take an example approach to a segregation of duties assessments. What is it we do, or what should we do? First of all, companies need a process for establishing and managing segregation of duties. Establishing a process for defining segregation of duty rules and policies, aligning them with organizational and process, establishing enforcement, mitigating controls, and monitoring. These are all essential components of a good segregation of duty solution that helps to meet your business objectives. And it also helps you to comply with regulatory compliance, mitigate the risk of fraud, align your functions with your IT goals, and gain a level of comfort that your financial statements are reported accurately. In addition, a good segregation of duties system and compliance with CASA and Sarbanes-Oxley can lead to increased confidence from your customers and your investors. Okay, now what is a program to establish and manage the segregation of duties? One of the first components is the rules and policies. All right, and we have several hundred segregation of duty rules, including access or restricted access rules, which were developed by Oracle and the Big Four, and as well as the firms that we've worked with over the last 2 or 3 years to implement these segregation of duty solutions. What we do is we do use the rules that Oracle has predefined with their Oracle Application Access Controls Governor, and we augment those with additional rules that we have identified during the last 2 or 3 years. We perform a risk. Generally, you perform some sort of organization and process alignment. You perform a risk assessment to identify your requirements and strategies. You identify the key stakeholders and establish some sort of communication plan to communicate with these stakeholders. You understand what and adopt your policies and procedures for maintaining a good segregation of duties. You build and maintain support within the organization. You identify the appropriate segregation of duty points. What is it you're trying to do? Again, these are all the best practices that every organization should implement. And then you need a way to establish enforcement. We recommend that you use Oracle Application Access Controls Governor to facilitate the enforcement of SOD controls. Furthermore, you can establish preventive enforcement by integrating the Oracle Application Access Controls Governor with Oracle Preventive Controls Governor to prevent someone during the user provisioning process from granting a user an additional responsibility or functions that would represent an SOD conflict, and you can either prevent them. You can elect to just simply monitor these, or you can force them to go through some sort of approval process. In our analysis, we do use the Application Access Controls Governor as our engine to do the analysis, all right, of your controls. Now, after you've done the analysis of your controls, you need to remediate whatever conflicts that you have. So what we do is we review the GRC reports with your business process owners and system administrators to help you revise your your Oracle security model to resolve these control violations. Essentially what we do, we show you what we think you may need to do in your Oracle Release 12 instance with regards to menus and functions within menus and responsibilities assigned to users to eliminate some of these SOD violations. We also eliminate false positives from these controls. We don't want you going to your business owners claiming that there's one or more control violations only to find out that they are in fact not a true control violation. And I'll just give you a couple examples, and we'll look down in the slide further in this deck to identify additional examples or rules. One example would be you have a responsibility that's assigned to a user, but the responsibility's been end dated and it's no longer valid. Well, you don't want to report that. Or you have a user that had a lot of different responsibilities, but that user's been end dated. Or you have a responsibility assigned to a user that's been end dated. Now, these are just three quick examples of what could lead to false positives. Now, if you choose not to revise the number of functions assigned to a user, maybe due to restraints in your resources, then we can help you mitigate these controls. We help you define, document, and implement, if necessary, the compensating controls for functions that cannot be adequately segregated. We help you just document, hey, look, we know that we have a violation here, but here's what we do to mitigate the risk of fraud or the risk associated with that control. Now, the final piece here is just the monitoring and governance piece. The fact that you are considering having us do an SOD assessment, that's part of your monitoring and governance program. Ideally, you would want to implement the Oracle GRC Control Suite, which includes the Oracle Application Access Controls Governor and the Transaction Controls Governor, to enable you to monitor and enforce the segregation of duties in real time. Now, Oracle Application Access Controls Governor helps companies manage and enforce segregation of duties. That's just what I was saying. I encourage you to, after we go through this exercise, to take a look at the Oracle GRC applications. Give us a call. We'll tell you how you can use them. And if you're doing an implementation or an upgrade, we can tell you how you can leverage not only the Oracle Application Access Controls Governor, but the Oracle Configuration Controls Governor, which is a different GRC application, to reduce your costs, reduce time, and improve your internal controls during the upgrade and or implementation process. All right. Now, these the AACG, or Oracle Application Access Controls Governor, again, that's used to enforce segregation of duty controls and also restricted access controls. Like, for example, who has access to a customer? Who can create a customer? Obviously, you don't want a lot of people having access to that particular function or functions. Who has access to create a supplier? Who can define all of the credit parameters for a customer? Okay, these are the type of things that you would want to review or monitor in terms of restricted access. All right. And of course, these applications do come with a comprehensive library of best practice SOD controls. We use them during our SOD analysis, and you will see some of those controls. Now, this is the SOD assessment process. I want to go through it with you very, very quickly so you understand what we do to make this work, to do the assessment. We ask that you take a copy of your production instance and create a test instance. It should be a recent copy of your production instance, so we don't have issues with business process owner claiming that that's not the way it really is in production. Okay, you want a recent copy. And then what we do is we give you a script that will extract data from your test instance, all right? Eventually, after we do on the test instance, we run the same script in production instance too, so that we can remediate any SOD violations in your production instance. We create a database on our own server to store the data that we extract. We import that data that we extracted into the database, okay? Then what we do is we make a link from that database that we created for you to Oracle Applications Access Controls Governor, which is the engine for doing the SOD analysis. Next, we create the SOD controls for you. Now, again, these would be controls that we imported during the installation of the Oracle Application Access Controls Governor. These are the predefined controls defined by Oracle. And we have added some additional controls that we have developed in conjunction with the Big Four and some of our clients. Okay. Next, we define global access conditions to eliminate false positives. And I covered that a little bit early, and I'll cover it in more depth here, in a subsequent slide. So I don't want to spend a lot of time. But the idea is we don't want you to go to your business process owner claiming that there's some sort of violation when in fact the user doesn't have access to whatever it is that's a violation. So after we've done that, we do our control analysis. We simply generate the analysis using the Oracle engine. Next, we generate and review these incident reports. Now, if there are incidents, we remediate those incidents. We help you remediate. And remember now, we're working in a test environment initially. So what we do is we work with your system administrator to review the reports, work with your business process owners to decide which, if any, functions we need to remove from a user's responsibility to resolve that issue. If that issue can't be remediated due to a lack of resources, we help you mitigate that SOD control, and all that means is we simply help you define or identify the controls you have in place that compensate for that lack of control. And again, this is just another way of looking at what we did. These are the tasks that we do during the assessment process, the extraction of the data that we need. Your DBA will do that, and again, we recommend that you take a copy of your production instance to do this step. Next, we create a database for you. Our DBA does that. We create a database for you on our own server to store this information that we extract. We import the data into the database, and then again, we make that link between that database and the Oracle Application Access Controls Governor so that we can do the analysis. And like I said, we create the controls. We use the Oracle predefined SOD models to create the segregation duty controls that we use to assess your SOD controls. And we'll provide you with the report that lists these SOD controls. And we recommend that you review them with your internal and external auditors to finalize the list of controls. I think it's important that you get their buy-in to it because you want them to rely on some of this work that you've done. This should be able to reduce some of the costs of your external audit. And then again, like I said, we define some global conditions to eliminate false positives. We create and we do the do the access synchronization, which just means we move the data from the database into the proper tables and application access controls governor, so that we can then generate the control analysis. And then obviously we run the reports, and then we fix the ones we can and define the compensating controls for the ones that we can't remediate. And then what we do is we repeat the assessment process again, extracting the data, importing the data into the database, and running control analysis. Because what we want to do is we want to make sure that we did a good job of cleaning up these SOD control violations. And this is an iterative process. You may have to do it more than once. But after you've finished and you feel comfortable with what needs to be done in the production instance, then what we ask is that you then replicate the changes or the revisions you made in the test instance directly into your production instance, using whatever change control or change management procedures you have in place. All right. And once you've done that, we run the analysis again. We have to extract the data, this time from production, put it into a database, and go through all those steps so we can analyze that data. And once we've done that, we may have to go back, do some more remediation or mitigation type work, and then run the process again until we're satisfied that things are cleaned up. All right. Now let's take a look at some of these sample controls. I won't go into them into detail because they're here on the slides, but I want you to be aware of what they are. And what we have predefined segregation of duty rules for procure to pay, order to cash, accounting to reporting, hire to terminate, and the acquire to retire processes. All right, and a few of them, and I've listed here in this table: procure to pay controls, order to cash controls, accounting to reporting controls, and hire to terminate controls. An example of procure to pay, and this is the control, is approve and create invoices. Approve invoices and create payments. The name of the control identifies the functions, the two incompatible functions. And under approve and create invoices, that includes every single function that you can use to approve an invoice and create an invoice. And you'll see there are many ways within Oracle to approve an invoice or create an invoice, or to create a purchase order, there's just a number of different functions. So anyway, these are some of the SOD controls that we use for the analysis, and you can look through the other ones here. All right. Okay. Then we also have restricted access controls, and again, these would be functions that are restricted and should be assigned to only a few users. So what you do is you might want to, and these are just suggestions. You might be concerned with everybody who has access to an AP invoice. How many people can approve a payroll? How many people can configure the general ledger or have access to the customer master or the item master or the vendor payments? Okay, so what we want to do is we want to eliminate access to that, and what we're able to do is report and show all the users who do in fact have access to these controls, to these restricted functions. And then here are some of the conditions we talked about to eliminate the false positives. We want to exclude all Oracle responsibilities that are indated. If they're indated, they're no longer in effect. Similarly, we want to exclude the menus and submenus where the grant flag is set to no. It means they can't access that function. All right. And we also want to exclude the menu functions that appear in the menus that are assigned to responsibility for that user that have no function prompt. For example, users cannot access a function on a form unless they have a menu function prompt to click on. Therefore, we exclude these functions from the SOD analysis. Okay. Similarly, we want to exclude users who have been indated. You may want to exclude functions that allow a user to only view a function unless you need to limit access to view sensitive information. Okay, now this is some of the sample output. These are the various reports that we provide you. The first one is what is called the control detail extract report. This is essentially a printout of the definition of each control. Now this one shows approve invoices and create invoices. It shows you that the control logic is made up of two entitlement names, create invoices and approve invoices. And what this means is an entitlement is a grouping of all access points or functions that allow a user to create an invoice. Similarly, the approve invoices entitlement is a group of all those access points or functions that enable a user to approve an invoice. And there may be only one, or there could be more than one, okay? And then it shows the people who will be notified, when you run a report and there's a deficiency. These are the ones that are responsible for cleaning up or remediating any deficiencies associated with this particular control. Again, I think this report would be useful just to simply sit with your external auditors and say, hey, look, this is what we define. Is there anything else we need to define? Does it look good to you? All right, that sort of thing. This report here, the Incident by Control Summary Extract Report, I don't really use this during the remediation process myself. I suggest you take a look at it. You can download it into Excel, and what it does, it says for every control, it'll tell you the number of incidents there are outstanding. All right, and maybe what you could do is, if you actually use the control priority, you might want to take a look at the ones with the higher priority with the most number of incidents, and then you can use that to look at some of the other reports. All right, I think this is just a measure of just what's out there. Okay, and then you look at the access violations by user report. And this report shows, as you can see, here's the user, Bridget Huber, and for control invoices and create invoices, it lists all of the conflicting rows. Now this could be, here it lists one row, payables, MOAC, worldwide, and payables is the application, but here's the name of the responsibility. Payables, MOAC, worldwide. And if you see here, these are the conflicting pairs. This particular row allows this user access to expense reports and invoice approvals. It also, the same row, allows access to invoice approvals and open interface invoices. So these are the incompatible functions. If you take a look here, this one is more black and white. It gives the user access to the invoices function and access to the invoice approvals function. All right. So typically what I do is I like to use this after I have gone through the report that shows the intra-row violations, or the violations within a specific Oracle responsibility, and then run this report so that you can see, well, maybe you cleaned up the ones within a specific responsibility, which we have in here, as you can see, otherwise it wouldn't be listed. All right. I mean, obviously this row still has conflicts associated with it. All right. But anyway, if you did clean them up, the only thing it might show you where they have access to conflicting responsibilities due to the fact that they have access to more than one row. Okay. And this is the one I was talking about, the access violations within a single user report. I like to run this first, and then what it does, it lists the role. In this case, it's Oracle General Ledger Super User. The General Ledger is the application. The control is inner journal entry and post journal entry. It shows the users who have incidents, because they have access through this role. They are able to enter and post a journal entry, and the grouping is really the same, as you can see here. They can post a journal, they can post journals, enter encumbrance, post journals, and enter journals. I mean, these are all the conflicting rows. The conflicting rows enter encumbrances and auto post criteria, and the another conflicting pair is post journals and enter encumbrances. All right. The point I'm trying to make here is this is where you would sit, I think, with your business process owner and say, hey, look, Harold has access to this responsibility, and what is it that Harold really needs to do, and which of these functions can we eliminate so that so that Harold no longer represents an SOD violation. That's essentially what it is. Intra-row violations by control report. This is similar to the other report. It just shows you the report, shows you the control, then it shows you all the roles that have access violations within that role. All right. In other words, the Order Management Super User for Vision Operations USA enables that user to create a customer and access and create customer credit information. So this is another way of looking at those roles. It doesn't identify the user, but it does show you the roles that you need to go in there and clean up. All right. Okay, now let's take a look. What does it cost to complete an SOD assessment? All right, what we've done here is I put a little table together, and we've come up with a cost of approximately $13,000 to complete an assessment. And this is roughly 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks of work I think it'll take. And the first thing is every time we run that assessment process where we have to do the extraction, import it, set everything up, run the analysis, run the report, that's $2,500, okay? And you can get back. I've gone through all the tasks that it entails, but you can click on the link here and go back. There's a number of tasks that it entails. The next thing that we have in here is I estimated 4 hours just to do some random tests to ensure that the GRC incident reports are accurate, all right? And that's 4 hours. Now, the remediate, mitigate the SOD conflicts in the test instance, this is where we work with you. We may do a lot of it ourselves just to show you what needs to be done, but we work with your business process owners. And we estimate this to be a 40-hour effort. It just depends how quickly your business process owners can make decisions. But we estimated 40 hours at our rate of $125 an hour, all right? Now, the next thing is to perform the SOD controls and that assessment again in the test instance. We did it once. We made the corrections in the EBS instance. Now we need to test it again to make sure we did what we needed to do, and that's where this price comes in, $2,500. The next thing you're going to do is you, the client, that's the reason why I have non-billable here, unless you want us to help you, need to go into your your production instance and replicate the changes we made in test in your production instance, okay? And again, we can help you with that. You could use us on an as-needed basis, all right? And then after we do that, we're going to run the first assessment in production. We know what we need to. We took a copy of production. We did the work and test, so we know what needs to be done. So we can make those corrections in that production instance, and then run the assessment in production. And what we would do is, after we run the assessment in production, we'd take a look at it. If it looks like there was a lot of work that needed to be done, we would go ahead in the EBS production instance, make whatever changes you need to make, and then probably run that assessment again, all right? Which would then push this number up a little bit. But you may or may not have to do that. I tried to keep it within $10,000 to $15,000, all right? I think that the benefit of doing this is there are a number of benefits. One, you really don't want your external auditors to come in and find all kinds of SOD control violations. I mean, they probably won't report a material deficiency on your financial statements, but it could end up in your management report that goes to senior management and your board of directors. And then when that happens, then you have to get like SOX advisors involved or internal auditors to fix these things, and it probably entails more work with your external auditors to make sure you've remediated or mitigated these SOD controls properly. So you'll save money up front if you're proactive and fix these violations before the auditors come on site. Okay, and then just a little bit about the OIC. The OIC stands for Oracle Independent Consultants, LLC, and we're a leading provider of risk advisory and Oracle Fusion governance, risk, and compliance solutions. Our OIC GRC Express is an approved Oracle Accelerate program for Oracle GRC controls and provides fixed scope methodologies for the rapid deployment of the Oracle GRC controls suite of applications. The solutions are designed to make Oracle GRC controls applications more affordable for mid-sized organizations and other organizations. The OIC's Oracle Accelerate solution significantly reduces implementation costs and time frames and lowers the total cost of ownership of the Oracle GRC controls, obviously helping our clients realize their return on investment much quicker. I also supplied you with a link to the Oracle Governance, Risk, and Compliance portal. I encourage you to take a look at the information that's out there. I also provide you with the link to contact us or myself at the OIC so you can learn a little bit more. We do have the Oracle GRC applications installed, so we can certainly give demos of those applications. And that concludes the overview of the assessment. And if we can help you in any way or answer any of your questions, feel free to contact us.